The alarm blared across the command deck of the Zyrene Empire's largest space station. A human warship had entered their territory, a lone vessel against an empire that ruled over 100 worlds. The Zyrene officers watched the screen, unimpressed. Humanity was a young race, barely a few centuries into space travel. Compared to the Zyrene, who had conquered civilizations for over 10,000 years, the humans were insignificant. Their ships were smaller, their fleets fewer, and their reach across the galaxy almost non-existent. This was no invasion, this was suicide. High Commander Varlo Exene smirked as he addressed his officers. Humans have finally lost their minds. One warship against an empire? Let them come! We will swat them down like the insects they are. Laughter filled the bridge. To them, this was nothing more than entertainment. The Zyrenes sent out their first wave of scout ships, expecting an easy kill. The moment they got within range, however, something strange happened. The human warship did not fire its weapons. Instead, it vanished. The Zyrene pilots barely had time to react before their ships started exploding one by one. There was no visible attack, no incoming projectiles, just instant destruction. Panic spread through the fleet as the surviving scouts tried to escape, but it was too late. The human ship reappeared behind them, cutting through space like a phantom. It unleashed a single pulse of energy, and the Zyrene ships were gone. Back at the command station, silence fell over the bridge. The laughter had stopped. High Commander Varlo leaned forward, his smug expression fading. "What was that?" he muttered. The officers scrambled for answers. Humans did not have this level of technology. The Zyrene had spied on them for centuries. Their warships were advanced, but nothing like this. This vessel moved too fast, hit too hard, and left no trace of its attacks. It was as if the ship itself was rewriting the laws of physics. The Zyrene wasted no time. A battle fleet was mobilized, over 50 warships, armed with the most powerful weapons in the Empire. They surrounded the human vessel, cutting off all escape routes. Varlo stood tall, his voice echoing through the station. "Surrender now, humans. You cannot win." But the human ship did not respond. It simply hovered, waiting. Then, in an instant, it vanished again. The Zyrene warships opened fire, filling the empty space with plasma cannons and missile barrages. But they were shooting at nothing. Suddenly, alarms blared as their own ships began to explode from within. The human ship was inside their formation, moving faster than their sensors could track. One by one, Zyrene vessels collapsed under the assault. Their shields were useless, their weapons too slow. The human ship was not fighting like an ordinary vessel, it was hunting. Panic consumed the Zyrene fleet. Captains screamed for reinforcements. Pilots abandoned their posts. They had never seen an enemy like this one that did not just attack, but outthought them at every turn. Then came the final horror. The human ship sent a message, not just to the fleet, but to the entire Zyrene Empire. It was a simple transmission, a voice cold and calculated. "You have ruled for 10,000 years. Your reign ends today." And then, the real slaughter began. The human warship unleashed its full power, cutting through the remaining Zyrene fleet like a blade through paper. Ships that had survived for centuries, vessels that had crushed entire civilizations, were torn apart in minutes. The battle was over before it even truly began. Back on the command station, Varlo Exene watched in horror. The Empire's greatest fleet, their strongest warships, their finest warriors all gone. His hands trembled as he tried to speak, but no words came out. The Zyrene had always believed themselves superior, their rule unshakable. But now, standing in the ruins of his once mighty fleet, Varlo realized the terrible truth. They had underestimated the humans, and they had doomed themselves because of it. The Zyrene fleet floated in perfect formation, their massive warships forming an impenetrable wall of firepower. They had fought countless wars, conquered civilizations, and crushed rebellions without effort. Today would be no different. A lone human warship had entered their space, and they were ready to destroy it like any other foolish trespasser. The Zyrene commanders were not concerned. They had studied humans, monitored their progress, and concluded that humanity was nothing more than a minor species, brave perhaps, but insignificant in war. The fleet's admiral, Jack Talos, stood at the heart of the command deck, watching the human vessel on the holographic display. "Send a warning shot," he ordered lazily. "Let them know their time is up." A barrage of energy blasts shot across space, illuminating the darkness. The human ship did not move. It simply hovered, silent and still. Jeek smirked. "They're too afraid to run." Then, without warning, the human warship vanished. One moment it was there, the next it was gone. Confusion spread through the fleet. Sensors scrambled to relocate it. Officers barked orders, scanning the void for any sign of movement. "Impossible," one Zyrene strategist muttered. "No ship moves that fast." Before anyone could process what had happened, the first explosion rocked the fleet. A Zyrene battleship, one of their largest, erupted in flames. Fire and debris scattered across space as alarms blared through the remaining warships. Panic spread instantly. The humans had not disappeared, they had attacked. Within seconds, another ship was torn apart, split down the middle by an unseen force. Zyrene officers shouted commands, trying to form a counterattack, but the human warship was everywhere and nowhere at once. It moved through the fleet like a ghost, too fast for their weapons to lock onto. The Zyrene had never seen technology like this before. Their ships were built for brute strength, not speed. Against most enemies, this strategy worked. But today, it was a death sentence. Jack Talos clenched his fists as he watched the destruction unfold. His ships were not even getting a chance to fight back. The human warship's attacks were precise, targeted. It did not waste energy firing wildly. It struck where it hurt the most: engine cores, weapon systems, communication hubs. Within minutes, half the fleet was disabled or destroyed. "Find them! Fire at anything that moves!" Jack bellowed, desperation creeping into his voice. His officers obeyed, launching missiles in every direction. But they were too slow. The human ship slipped past every attack, weaving through the chaos like it knew their every move before they made it. Then, the human vessel sent its first and only transmission. The voice was calm, mechanical, but there was something terrifying about it. "You were warned." The message ended, and with it, the last phase of the slaughter began. The human ship stopped playing defense. It charged forward, cutting straight through the Zyrene formation. Blazing energy beams sliced through hulls like paper. Explosions lit up space, turning the once powerful fleet into a graveyard. The Zyrene warriors, who had spent their entire lives believing they were invincible, now found themselves in the one position they had never imagined: the losing side. Jack Talos stared at the screen, watching his empire's finest warships disintegrate in seconds. This wasn't just a defeat. This was a message. Humanity had not come to negotiate. They had not come to plead for survival. They had come to make a point that they were not weak, not inferior, and not afraid. The last thing Jeek saw before the human ship's final blast ripped through his command center was the horrifying realization that he had made a mistake that could never be undone. The Zyrene fleet was no more. The Empire would soon hear of this massacre, and they would know one thing for certain. The humans were not prey. They were hunters. And now they were coming. The Zyrene High Command had never known fear. For centuries, their fleets had ruled the stars, crushing rebellions, conquering worlds, and eliminating any species that dared to challenge their supremacy. Their technology was superior, their strategy unmatched, and their empire unshakable. Or at least, that's what they had believed until today. Now, in the heart of their grand war station, surrounded by officers who had never lost a battle, fear crawled into their bones like a sickness. A single human warship had reduced one of their strongest fleets to wreckage in minutes. It defied all logic. The humans were supposed to be weak, their technology inferior. How had they done this? Admiral Silix Varek stood motionless, his four eyes fixed on the holographic display in front of him. The battle was over, yet the horror had just begun. What had once been a proud fleet of 50 warships was now burning debris, floating lifelessly in the void. The Zyrene warriors aboard those ships had not even fought back properly. They had been annihilated before they could understand what was happening. The human vessel, still intact and untouched, now drifted through the wreckage, like a predator surveying its kill. Cilix clenched his fists, his breathing unsteady. This was impossible. The Zyrene had studied humans for centuries. Their ships were not this fast. Their weapons were not this advanced. Their tactics were reckless and primitive. But today, everything they thought they knew had been proven wrong. A panicked voice broke through the tense silence. High Admiral, we lost the fleet in less than 4 minutes. That's not. The officer hesitated, his voice trembling. That's not war. That's extermination. Cilix's temper flared. Enough, he barked, but his voice carried no confidence. The room was filled with trembling officers, each one desperately scanning the battle data, searching for an explanation that didn't exist. One of them, a young strategist, whispered under his breath, "Are we sure this was even a human ship?" The thought sent chills through the room. Humanity was not supposed to be this powerful. Had they been hiding their strength all this time? Had the Zyrene underestimated them to such an extent? Desperate for answers, Cilix replayed the battle recordings. He watched in disbelief as the human ship moved at impossible speeds, phasing in and out of detection. 1 second, it was in front of the fleet. The next, it was behind them, tearing through their ships with unnatural precision. The Zyrene had fired thousands of rounds, launched every countermeasure, but not a single shot had landed. It was as if the human ship knew what they would do before they even did it. That was the part that terrified him the most. The communications console suddenly came alive with a high-priority message. It was from the Zyrene Grand Council, the rulers of the Empire. "Admiral Cilix," a cold voice spoke, "we have seen the battle reports. Explain how one human warship destroyed our fleet." Cilix swallowed hard. "Whoa! We do not know, my lords," he admitted, his voice hollow. The silence on the other end was heavy. "You do not know?" The voice was dangerously calm. "How is it that a lesser species has outmatched our most advanced warships? How is it that the mighty Zyrene Empire has lost so utterly?" Cilix had no answer. Because the truth was unthinkable, the Zyrene had been arrogant. They had believed humans were beneath them. And now, that arrogance had cost them everything. Another officer shouted in alarm. "The human ship is moving again." The room froze. On the display, the warship was no longer drifting, it was accelerating toward the Zyrene homeworld. The implications were horrifying. Had humanity not just come for a battle? Had they come for war? A war the Zyrene were not prepared to fight? Cilix's heart pounded as he realized what this meant. This was not just an attack. This was a warning. And if the Zyrene didn't act fast, it might be the last warning they ever received. The Zyrene High Council had gathered in the Grand War Chamber, their massive forms seated in a circle of authority. Fear, an emotion they had not felt in centuries, hung heavy in the air. The battle reports were displayed before them, images of their greatest fleet reduced to ruins by a single human warship. It was unthinkable. Humans were supposed to be weak, barely capable of space travel. They were meant to be inferior, struggling to survive in the vast and merciless galaxy. Yet, here they were, standing at the top of the food chain, while the Zyrene, once conquerors of 100 worlds, trembled in silence. Admiral Voraxel, one of the last survivors of the destroyed fleet, stood in front of them, his voice hollow. "My lords, this is not the humanity we thought we knew. They were never weak. They were never behind us. They were simply waiting." His words sent a chill through the chamber. Waiting? For what? The answer was clear, the perfect moment to strike. The humans had deceived the entire galaxy, playing the role of an underdog, pretending to be vulnerable, hiding in plain sight. And now, after centuries of patience, they had revealed their true power, and it was beyond anything the Zyrene had ever seen. The council members reviewed the battle footage, their disbelief growing with each frame. The human ship had moved like a phantom, appearing and disappearing at will. It had outmaneuvered, outgunned, and outthought the Zyrene at every step. Their strongest warships, their most advanced technology, it had all been useless. The humans had played a long game, allowing the Zyrene and other alien empires to believe they were behind in technology while secretly developing weapons and strategies beyond comprehension. The worst part? They had never once used this power before. Not in small skirmishes, not in trade disputes, not even when their colonies were threatened. They had remained silent, waiting. One of the council members, his voice shaking, spoke up. Why reveal themselves now? The question lingered in the air like a storm cloud. What had changed? Why had humanity finally decided that it was time to show the truth? Vorexel tightened his jaw. Because they don't fear us anymore. Because they're ready. A heavy silence fell over the chamber as a new transmission appeared on the screen. It was from the humans. A single figure stood before them, a human admiral clad in black, his expression unreadable. His voice was calm, but the weight of his words crushed any remaining confidence the Zyrene had. For centuries, we have watched. We have listened. We have learned. The galaxy saw us as weak, as lesser beings. We let you believe that. We let you think we were behind, struggling to catch up. But the truth is, we were never behind. We were simply waiting for you to make a mistake. A chilling realization spread through the room. The Zyrene had not just underestimated the humans. They had been played. Every war, every invasion, every act of dominance the Zyrene had committed, they had done so under the watchful eyes of an enemy that had been studying them the entire time. The human continued, his voice like a blade cutting through the silence. You thought yourselves untouchable. You believed your empire would stand forever. But now, you know the truth. We are not your prey. We are not your servants. We are not afraid of you. You are afraid of us. And you should be. The transmission ended, and for the first time in their long history, the Zyrene knew what it meant to feel true fear. Humanity had never been weak. They had been hunters, disguised as prey. And now the hunt had begun. The last Zyrene warship drifted in the void, its once mighty hull torn apart, flames spilling into space like dying embers. Bodies of elite warriors floated in the wreckage, their empire's pride reduced to nothing but silent ghosts. The battle, if it could even be called that, had ended minutes ago. There had been no grand fight, no last stand, no desperate struggle for survival. There had only been annihilation. The humans had come, and the Zyrene, the so-called rulers of the galaxy, had fallen like insects beneath an unrelenting storm. On the human flagship, Admiral Elias Voss stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his icy gaze fixed on the holographic display before him. The enemy fleet had been erased, just as predicted. It was not arrogance that had brought humanity to this moment, it was patience. Decades, centuries of patience. Humanity had listened while the galaxy whispered of their weakness. They had nodded when other empires claimed they were behind. They had let the universe believe the lie. And now, as the flames of Zyrene warships illuminated the darkness, the truth could no longer be denied. A junior officer turned from his console, his voice steady but laced with something deeper satisfaction. The enemy fleet is completely destroyed, sir. We have full control of the sector. The bridge crew remained silent, watching, waiting. There was no celebration, no cheering. The victory had been inevitable from the start. The Zyrene just hadn't known it yet. Elias nodded slowly, then gave the order that would change the course of history. Send the message. Across the shattered battlefield, as Zyrene distress signals flickered hopelessly into the void, a single transmission echoed through space, reaching every corner of the known galaxy. Every empire, every species, every ruler who had once mocked humanity heard it. We are not weak. We were waiting. Silence followed. A silence so vast, so absolute, that it felt as though the entire universe had momentarily stopped breathing. And then, the fear began to spread. In the halls of the mighty XLR Dominion, their High Council trembled as they replayed the message, their once golden skin pale with terror. The humans had never been behind. They had been watching, learning, and preparing. On the frozen worlds of the Dreknar Imperium, warlords, who had once boasted of their power, now whispered among themselves, realization dawning in their reptilian eyes. The humans had let them believe in their own superiority, feeding their arrogance like a patient predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And on the capital world of the now crippled Zyrene Empire, what remained of their leadership sat in stunned horror. Their most powerful fleet was gone. Their greatest warriors had been eliminated before they had even understood what was happening. The Zyrene had spent centuries believing they were the apex species, that no force could rival them. And yet, in less than an hour, humanity had proved them wrong. Back aboard the human flagship, Elias watched as reports flooded in from intelligence networks across the galaxy. Panic, fear, desperation. The strongest empires, the most ruthless conquerors, they were afraid. And rightly so. The truth had been revealed. Humanity had never been struggling to keep up. They had never been weak. They had only been waiting for the day the galaxy became comfortable enough to lower its guard. And now that day had come. For centuries, the galaxy had believed that humanity was the underdog. But today, as the embers of warships burned and terror spread like wildfire, one thing had become clear. The humans had never been prey. They were the hunters. And now, the hunt had begun.